Gina, I wanted to start with you and this term, reindustrialization, which is not a new term, but I think in kind of the lexicon of policy terms is one that has kind of a plasticity to it. It means different things to different people. And you've described in the past, let's say, debates that you had with the past president about a manufacturing renaissance in this country and how targeted or nuanced that should be. So with that preamble, I'm curious how you define the term, how you see reindustrialization unfolding in the country today.
Good morning. It's great to be here. I think this has been a fantastic conference. I hope everybody has. I know you're all probably tired on Friday, but I hope you've enjoyed it. So you referenced the discussions I used to have with my old boss. There are some, like my old boss, who think everything ought to be made in America. We could be able to make everything, don't want to just be at the end of the supply chain. And I have a slightly different view. You know, not everything can or should be made, mined, assembled in the US. That being said, we took our eye off the ball in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and decided we didn't want to make anything, right? We thought it would be fine to allow China to be the world's manufacturer, which is exactly what they want to be. And that doesn't make for a strong country, which is what America should and does lead the world. So we have to make strategic, high-value things in the US, which we can do, right? Especially with automation. We can make cars, we can make semiconductors, we can make batteries, we can make magnets. And so I think it has to be focused. It's not the commodity products. But beyond that, it makes us stronger, it makes our community stronger, creates jobs, and mostly we cannot be so reliant on China, on Taiwan, for these critical products.
Governor, I'm curious how you see it. When I think of Oklahoma, I don't think of a manufacturing state, and I think maybe 10 or 11% of your workforce is in manufacturing, 140,000 jobs out of 4 million people. How do you think about manufacturing in the context of what you've set out as your objective, to be a top 10 state, to be a state that's open for business? Are you pursuing that in a targeted way along the likes of what Gina's describing? Or are you kind of open to any company that wants to come and set up shop in Oklahoma? How are you thinking about it?
Well, like the Secretary said, I think COVID opened up our eyes to the need to get the supply chain closer to home. And so the Bipartisan CHIPS Act during the Biden administration was a great example of trying to encourage manufacturing to come back. So Oklahoma is focused on that as well. And we've had some wins here recently. But I think about, what do companies need that are overseas looking to come back to the U.S. to get into our market? I mean, I say the 3 Ps. They're looking for people, power, and permitting. So if you can get those 3 right, you're going to be able to attract the companies to your state. And so that's what we focus on. I mean, people, we just did a lot of tours here in Singapore regarding how they train that workforce. And I think they do a better job than we do in America of getting kids exposed and having businesses work with the academia. And then we went to Switzerland and looked at their apprenticeship model. So I think we've got to figure that out as in the U.S. and rethink about our education model a little bit. Power, everybody needs a reliable, affordable grid. Oklahoma has the most affordable energy in the country. And because of that, we just landed EGA, which is Emirates Global Aluminum, $5 billion investment, first aluminum smelter to be built in the U.S. in 45 years. They chose our state because of those energy prices. And then permitting, obviously, we have to figure that out as a country to get projects done. And I think Republican Democrats, we all, as governors, we want quicker projects for our states and for our economy.
Sarah, let me pick up on that. This notion that there's a palpable level of urgency from the White House. The president wants things to change and move quickly. You now in your career focus on the long term, thinking about the long term, getting investors and executives to focus more on the long term. How difficult is that dissonance to brook? It takes a long time to build a factory. Mm-hmm. It takes a long time to find or train a workforce to work there. And this is a moment when policy is kind of inchoate when it comes to trade policy and other policy at the federal level. How are the executives, investors that you talked to today thinking about that, making large strategic, expensive strategic decisions in a policy environment that is a bit unclear?
Well, the policy environment is unclear, and I think when you look at big companies or big investors that are trying to put money to work for some period of time, one of the things that's important is to make sure that the policies are at least clear enough that that won't turn out to be a bad investment. So I think that what's important for people deploying capital is to have some certainty that there will be a return on that capital, not just because of the rules that we have at this minute, but the rules that we have over a long period of time, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is that it takes to get that investment to fruition. And so I think there is a concern right now in terms of companies investing in the U.S. in particular, that they don't want to invest in something just because of current political pressure. If the rules change, then is it still competitive on a global scale? So at the end of the day, companies have to be able to compete globally with other companies around the world, and have to be able to get that return on their investment no matter what environment comes, and assuring people that those policies will stick, I think, is a really important thing to be done today.
We're going to talk about some of the hurdles, maybe the 3 Ps that you brought up as well. We have a poll. I'm very excited to have a poll during this panel because I haven't had one yet. So I'll have folks weigh in on this, sort of what you think the single biggest obstacle is to reviving U.S. industry. And Governor, let me pick up on what Sarah just said. As you talk to companies interested perhaps in setting up shop in Oklahoma, what do they tell you about concerns they may or may not have about policy certainty at the national level? And how can you kind of assuage that concern in a one-on-one meeting with an executive?
You know, it's interesting. I agree with you because businesses need certainty, right? And so that's what they foreign companies are asking. Well, what do you think about tariffs? What do you think is going to happen with this? And I think as Americans, we've had a pendulum swing approach from one administration to another that I think is very dangerous long term. And what I mean by that is, Oklahoma is heavy oil and gas, as you know, and we've got great pipeline companies. And, in the one administration, they kill the Keystone Pipeline, and the next administration brings it back, and then the next administration kills it. And we just can't have it. And finally, the businesses are just saying, hey, no more. We're not gonna keep investing these dollars. And so I think we need to stop that. And then obviously my friends in the Northeast, now there's wind projects being canceled. So the pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline, I love to share this story. So there's already 2 pipelines from Canada to Cushing, Oklahoma. Cushing, Oklahoma is the largest commercial oil reserve in the country, 100 million barrels. And there's already 2 pipelines. One's already called the Keystone. The Keystone XL was going to be the 3rd. And we know that moving oil and natural gas by pipeline is the safest way to do it. And so politics get involved, of course. And we just think that we can't have these pendulum swings long term. Businesses need certainty, whatever it is. So from a governor's perspective, as the chair of the National Governors Association, I know my friends on the other side of the aisle, they want an affordable electricity grid for their citizens as well. And they want affordable power. And most people are taking their kids to piano lessons and soccer practice and heating their homes and their businesses. And they want to know what's going on and why we don't have a reliable, affordable grid. And so the permitting is really, really important, that we have to have a conversation. And myself and Governor Shapiro led a permitting task force with the NGA to try to encourage our partners at the federal government to fix these issues, to get permits, to get projects done more quickly. Last thing I'll say is Williams is a big pipeline company in Oklahoma. And Williams, their CEO, was telling me it costs twice as much money to permit a pipeline as it does to build it. So think about you building your dream home and you're spending $1 million, and your permitting costs are going to cost $2 million versus what it's going to cost to actually build your house. That's got to change for us to win the AI race. That's got to change to get wind energy and more transmission lines. We've got to fix that permitting problem, and I think that's what businesses just want to make sure it's done.
Yeah.
Madam Secretary, I want to get your perspective in the job you just had, and then the one before that, you were governor as well. And there's the tension that Governor Stitt's describing, I think, between the power and enthusiasm at that subnational level, to use another kind of wonky term here, among governors to get things done, to work with federal partners, difficult as that may be. What insight do you have into how that relationship should unfold in the broader context of reindustrialization? Do states need more autonomy? Do they have sufficient autonomy? Sort of what should that relationship be like?
Yeah. I think the states are where it's at. talking to the governor backstage. At the end of the day, when you're a governor, you have to get the job done, right? You have to balance the budget, you have to make the state work, you hire, you fire, and you have not complete autonomy and authority. Every governor I've ever met, including myself, wants more authority because you have accountability, you want the authority. So the governor has a lot of tools in the toolbox to incentivize companies, and that's critical. But this issue of permitting is often federal. So for example, I was a very hands-on governor. I recruited a lot of companies to Rhode Island, helped them with tax incentives and infrastructure. And with permitting, when you're the governor, you can try to make things move faster. The federal government permitting needs massive reform. I was the architect and leader of the CHIPS Act, where we provided incentives for companies to come to the United States and build big semiconductor facilities. It was effective, but if TSMC wants to build a new factory in Arizona, they go through the local permitting and zoning, state permitting and other, environmental workforce, federal, air quality, water quality, environmental, all good. Then on top of that, something called NEPA, which is a wraparound national set of permitting for any projects that get any taxpayer dollars. For TSMC, for any company, just any one of these ones we worked with, it was often a 5 to 7 year permitting timeline before they could put a shovel in the ground. If you want to reindustrialize, if you want to compete, you got to change that. And I refuse to believe that you can't protect wildlife, air quality, water quality in less than 7 years. Like, we can do both, and we better get serious about streamlining that so that we can compete. Same thing the governor mentioned, Switzerland and apprenticeships. We need serious reform to post-secondary education in this country, or in my country, I believe. College isn't for everyone. It's incredibly expensive. It takes a long time. So if we're gonna reindustrialize, it's the whole package. It's the whole ecosystem of permitting reform, apprenticeship, making it easier and predictable. Even tariffs, you're talking about tariffs now. Some amount of tariffs most companies can live with, but not 40, 50%. And by the way, not changing every other month. So I think it's just certainty, transparency, speed, and we can do it. It's the political will to get it done.
I saw the poll populating in real time, and it looked like labor was seen as one of the bigger obstacles that folks face in doing this. And Sarah, I wanted to ask you, just picking up on what the Secretary just said, you look at Switzerland or Germany, there are private companies that kind of pick up the mantle and do a lot of this training. And I'm curious, from your vantage, how much enthusiasm or willingness there is for that to happen in the U.S., for companies to take up the mantle, assess what they need to reindustrialize, and then do that training themselves?
So I think the good news, bad news about the U.S. labor market is it's very fluid. So in some countries, if a company trains that individual, they're pretty sure that that individual will work for that company for a long period of time. In the U.S., it's much more common for people to change jobs and change jobs often. And so the challenge for one individual company is that, they may train that person and they go across the street. And so I think that's where some of the programs that the Secretary, the Governor have been talking about are extremely helpful. So I think one of the things that, of course, is changing all of this training is the idea more of certificates and things that belong to the individual that can be learned on an ongoing basis. Singapore has done a very good job of this, not just with young people, but continuing education. And so I hope that we can learn in the U.S. some lessons from some other countries. But I think putting the whole burden on businesses to train people who may walk across the street is not going to work.
Madam Secretary, there are countries that have workforce strategies.
Right.
Is the U.S. one of them? Is there a clearly defined strategy for the American workforce?
Awesome question, and the answer is no. And we need to get much more serious about it. So to that excellent point that you just made, if we had an apprenticeship program, if you find somebody who's young or out of work or wants to change, and you offer them an opportunity and train them, chances are they'll stick with you, right? If you find somebody we did this in Rhode Island in a state level, there were so many people. One of the biggest employers in Rhode Island makes submarines, most sophisticated submarines in the world, made in Rhode Island, electric boat. They needed to hire a few hundred welders every year. There's a very big shortage in the trades in the US. Electrical engineers, plumbers, pipe fitters, welders, and the like. So we set up an apprenticeship program. If you take somebody who's 18 or 19 years old, trying to get by, working as a waiter, waitress, whatever, and give them an opportunity for a career at a place like Electric Boat, they'll stick with the company. But right now, like I said, we don't have a purpose-built workforce system where we align who are we training with the jobs we want to create.
Governor, in that poll, another obstacle is the high cost of construction, building these facilities. So let's go back to the aluminum company that you mentioned, and I looked at the memorandum of understanding that you signed with that company, and there's tax increment financing, exemptions on sales tax on machinery and equipment and energy, and property income tax exemptions as well. What works when it comes to incentivizing companies to come and build and invest in Oklahoma? When you look at your toolkit of what you can offer them to kind of sweeten the deal, make Oklahoma look better than other states, what have you found is most effective?
Well, I saw the online there, your poll, and I would agree with it. Back to the 3 Ps. I think they're obviously worried about the workforce. They can't make what they're making unless they have the people in the workforce. So back to the Secretary's point, we've got to do a better job in the U.S. on that apprenticeship model and the trades. And, the incentives, states, there's 50 laboratories of democracy. So we compete with each other all the time on incentive packages, and that's part of the deal. The consultants will come in, and we're going to be as competitive as any other state, but we all have something we're going to compete for to try to recruit people to our state. But, I think more than anything, it's back to the people, it's back to the power. One of the reasons that EGA chose Oklahoma was because a big part of their income statement expenses was the electricity cost. So for them, that was a big driver. And I can't tell you how important, I've got an international strategy. I've met with 80 different ambassadors. Everywhere you go, all they want to talk about is the power, right? And how does the grid look, and what is the makeup in your country, and how can we learn from what's happening in Oklahoma? And so I just think that's really important that we have an all-of-the-above approach. That's why I believe in free markets. I don't think the government should be putting their thumb on the scale and say, do this, don't do that. I think that's very dangerous. Let's let the businesses innovate to meet the needs of Americans. And like, for example, Oklahoma, you think we're just a huge oil and gas state, and we're actually number 7 producer in natural gas and number 5 in oil, something like that. But we're number 4 in electricity generated by wind, because we just have this all-of-the-above approach, and it's created this great opportunity for companies to look at our state. But also the workforce and going after certain industries. Like, we already have a cluster. We're huge aviation and defense. So going after those type of industries where you already have a workforce is important as well. And then when the Secretary was Secretary, Tulsa, Oklahoma got a $51 million technology hub grant, one of only 12 states, so thank you very much. We have utilized that greatly to continue to build on that hub of aviation. So it's autonomous vehicles, it's drone technology, and we've taken that $51 million that the feds invested in Oklahoma, and we've turned it into $150 million worth of private investments, and the goal is to have 50,000 new jobs out of 7,000 above the median income. And so we're using those resources just to create another cluster that we think is where the job market's moving.
Sarah, let's talk. Please jump in. Yeah.
By the way, I gave him the $51 million because he called me so often. He's a great, he's a great governor, right? When you're selling, you got to keep going.
Yeah.
But just 2 quick points on that. Number 1, industrialization, reindustrialization. If we do it right, it should help revitalize communities all over America. And listening to you talk, Oklahoma, every state in America has some competitive advantage, some strength. Maybe it's natural resources, maybe it's positioning on the coast, whatever. Problem is that when all you do is focus on maybe tech and services, it benefits the coasts. And so this initiative that the governor mentioned was designed to make investments in places in the US that could be very thriving economies, but have been overlooked. And I think the promise of reindustrialization, if we do it right, is to strengthen communities all over the country, not just the coast, and I'm from the coast. The second point, just really quickly on power, because it's a huge issue and getting much bigger, of course, as the hyperscalers. These data centers are power gobblers of a whole new proportion. But even that comes back to permitting.
Yeah.
It takes too long in our country to get hooked up to the grid. So it isn't just availability of power or grid infrastructure, those matter, it's the permitting. And that's fixable. That's a matter of political will to get the job done.
Can I piggyback on that real quick?
Yeah, please.
So real quick on because you're right, to get connected to the grid, a lot of times they're telling these companies, hey, it's going to be 7 years before we'll build new generation, right? And now the communities are like, well, man, do I really want this data center, this AI data center, because it's going to cost my power to go up? So this past session, I passed behind the meter. And we're getting a lot of attention nationally because I wanted to create a free market where you're not beholden to the public utilities. We like our public utilities. But now, with our behind the meter legislation that just passed, you can go hook up and you can sign a long-term contract with our natural gas producers. You can put your own turbine in. You can create your own electricity for your data center outside of the grid, which is just a free market principle. It holds everybody accountable. And we think that's also a solution that other states may look to. But it takes a little legislation to get done, but it also just creates more electrons on available for your state.
Sarah, we can't have this conversation without talking about tariffs policy and how that's weighing on all of these considerations. I'm curious, as you travel the world, what you're hearing about that, the degree to which that's a barrier to investment or reindustrialization, just the effects, the first order effects of having that policy in place, but that in kind of complement with the uncertainty that's come with it.
Yeah, so when I was the first time I ever heard the word friendshoring came out of your mouth 4 years ago at this conference. And maybe I don't know if it was the first time you said it, but it was the first time I heard it. And I think that has certainly sort of changed the whole mindset around, and obviously the tariffs have thrown in a whole nother wrinkle. But I think what's happening, particularly from the long-term capital point of view, so right now tariffs are typically on goods, a physical good. There have been some forays into restrictions on services, mostly the HP-1 visa issue. So that's essentially a service-oriented challenge. There to date have been very few restrictions, but some beginning on capital flows. So if you think about sort of the hierarchy of tariffs, if you will, it's goods, it's services, it's capital flows. And so I think the trend that we're seeing, you heard a little bit of this on the stage this week, of some of the large asset owners from other countries limiting their investment in the United States because they're unsure about that. But what I'm seeing around the world is friendshoring, if you will, of capital flows. In other words, people who are increasingly putting capital into their own country or their friends' countries, and they are increasingly pulling their capital back from countries that are perhaps not on the friends list. And I think that's a huge change for the capital markets that we're seeing today, and will be a long-lived. Now, unlike building a factory or reindustrializing where it does take 5 years or 7 years, you have physical goods, you have people, et cetera. Investors are used to being able to put money somewhere. Usually it's a two-way decision. If you make a mistake, you can pull it out, whereas building a factory, it's usually a one-way decision. You put that in, you don't pick it up and move it. So investors are more nimble than companies in terms of putting capital in the ground, but there is no question that this sort of friendshoring of capital flows is really happening right now.
Governor, I'm curious how you think about the trade policy that's in place, and your tenure in the governor's office precedes the implementation of these latest tariffs, but has it acted as a forcing mechanism? Has it made your job easier or more difficult? How do you see through that prism of the president's trade policy?
Well, first off, I agree with the president's effort to bring manufacturing back home and get it closer to the U.S. He wants to create jobs in the U.S., so I agree with that. Whether it's, and I think he uses a lot of that as a negotiating tool. And so, I mean, we'll see what the end result is, but we're trying to capitalize on it. We are looking at deals. We're seeing deals coming. I would say one problem with it that we're trying to get the administration to understand is like the EGA, or we got another big company coming in from Brazil, and they're building the widget in Oklahoma or in the U.S., but yet their machinery comes from another country, right? Comes from China, or you can't disrupt. So the machinery that comes to build the widget in the U.S., so why do we tariff that machinery coming in when we're doing what's good for America, so to speak? And so that's a little bit of a unintended consequence, I think, that's happening right now. And so we're trying to figure that out, because these are making the project costs go up so much on getting new manufacturing in the U.S. So that's an issue. But I think generally overall, Oklahomans are supportive of this effort to bring manufacturing back. And then the Bipartisan CHIPS Act and IRA during the Biden administration was also the same effort to bring manufacturing back closer to home. So both administrations, the good thing is we're generally going in the same direction. Administration, we're not having some pendulum swings on that, which I think is good for our country.
He's giving you a lot of props, props here.
Well, yeah, I appreciate all that. Thank you. The point that he just made is huge. When America took our eye off the ball with manufacturing, stopped making ships, stopped making chips, stopped making so much, the supply chains, all of the suppliers to those main manufacturers also went away, as well as the talent. The average age of a machinist, a CNC machine operator in the US, is in their 50s, and so on. Not that long ago, the entire Midwest was filled with small manufacturers, machinists who supplied the big companies. When that went away, the supply chain went away, which makes it much more expensive to manufacture in the United States. Why is it so expensive to make a ship in the United States? There's no suppliers, right? The supplier is 6 times as expensive to make a ship in the US as Korea. That isn't just labor, right? It's all the supply chain. So if we want more manufacturing in the United States, cars, semiconductors, the whole thing, we really can't tariff the supply chain for exactly the reason the governor said, or at least give a period of time, like a 5-6 year exemption, so the companies can build up the supply chain. Because if you're trying to make whatever, aluminum, semiconductors, automobiles, and you got to buy your equipment in Japan, Korea, et cetera, as an input, you cannot tariff that. It makes manufacturing more expensive, and it's at odds with your goal.
We're almost out of time, but I have to ask you about innovation and the role that innovation plays kind of with manufacturing. And I imagine there could be a kind of virtuous circle, that manufacturing could beget more R&D, then there'd be more manufacturing. How do you make sure that you get that circle, that you catalyze that process? Because I think that wrapped up in all of this is an element of nostalgia, that we just need factories, we need jobs.
Yeah.
That's the principal goal. But there is a world, an ideal world perhaps, in which this is something that is going to lead to more innovation out of the manufacturing that we would get back in the States.
It absolutely will. And this is why I would say to my former boss, we don't need to manufacture baby seats and strollers and bicycles in the United States, but I do want to manufacture, high-end, high-value, and things for national defense. Here's the thing. When most people think of the relationship between R&D and manufacturing, they think research and development leads to more manufacturing, and it does. Come up with a new idea or medicine in a lab, then you make it. We tend to discount the other way, the R&D that comes from manufacturing. Every time a manufacturer becomes more efficient, more productive, more effective, more innovative, they're creating research and development. So truthfully, America is great at that. We protect IP, we have good talent, we have a rule of law. The virtuous cycle will happen. And I think that the point you made, going from the manufacturing to increase the R&D, is a flywheel that will get created if we focus on this high-end manufacturing. I mean, everything is technical. I went yesterday to visit the Hyundai Innovation Center here in Singapore. Unbelievably state-of-the-art, highly technical. All of that is research and development. That will be a flywheel.
Can I just add one thing
Yeah,
to that?
please.
I actually think the word reindustrialization does set us back, and it sounds like we're going back to bikes and so on. So I think more of that next generation manufacturing, which really is the robotics, the technology, all of those things. And I think that is a place, investing in that sort of next generation manufacturing is what we're talking about. And whether it's a company like Rebuild in the US or whoever it is, it's not about going back, it's about going forward. And I think that that's what businesses and investors want to do.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.